Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Werge. Welcome to the podcast. In tonight's conversation, I'm speaking to Nic Hulscher from the McCullough Foundation. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time this evening. I just wanted you to start off and introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background and what led you to work with this foundation.
Yeah, so my name is Nic Hulscher. I have completed a bachelor's in health sciences in 2020. I obtained that. That was in pre-health professional studies. And then I went on to get my master's in public health degree at the University of Michigan with a specialization in epidemiology. And actually, while I was obtaining that master's degree, I actually reached out to Dr. McCullough because none of my professors wanted to give me an internship, right? They're all busy. They're like, oh, this kid, we're not going to respond to him. And so Dr. McCullough answered within 5 minutes. 5 minutes with an entire study idea of the systematic review of autopsy findings after COVID vaccination. And so that's how it began. And ever since, we have completed around 20 studies now with the McCullough Foundation just since 2023. And so that's how we began operating. And now we're just churning out the studies. And now I'm actually the foundation administrator at the McCullough Foundation.
Incredible. Wow, that must be very cool to work alongside Peter. I know he's world-renowned as a physician. And just to help say the layperson understand, what is epidemiology? What does that mean?
So epidemiology is basically, just to understand it very easily, it's just the study of disease. So how does it spread? How do people get it? How are there good treatments for this? So just everything to do with disease, environmental exposures. So all these chemicals we see in the food, vaccines, pharmaceutical products. So basically everything in that area.
That's amazing. Very interesting. And in terms of the foundation itself, what is the reason it was started? Like, what I guess Peter is the founder, but what's the mission and I guess the vision statement behind the purpose of the organization?
So the organization is built upon 4 key pillars, and this is what keeps us running. This is our bread and butter. And first off, investigative scholarship. That's the first pillar. That involves all these studies, the 20 studies we've done so far in the past few years, and that also includes just basically doing research, scholarship in certain things, exposing this biopharmaceutical complex that Dr. McCullough has identified with John Leake, this conglomerate of pharmaceutical companies, regulatory agencies that are quite corrupt, and they're running the show at the moment. And so that's investigative scholarship. And then there's public policy. Public policy is we give our inputs on the daily as to what we recommend for policy changes. And right now, our main policy that we're advocating for is the immediate removal of these certain genetic injections from the global markets. And so that's policy. And then we have justice. So justice, Dr. McCullough has now been in I think hundreds now of court cases in the past few years, assisting people that have been unfairly prosecuted in this entire pandemic debacle. So we're assisting these cases out, helping our side be victorious. And then lastly, education, public and physician education. We disseminate documentaries, we disseminate videos daily. We have social media channels. We just started in April this year. We actually were able to grow up to 44,000 followers on X just within those few months. So we're growing at a rapid rate. We're disseminating this information, and we hope in the future we'll be able to expand and grow even more.
Incredible. It's such an I guess an encouragement to myself, as I mentioned a little bit before we started the chat, that I've been battling what I believe is long COVID for the last 2.5, almost 3 years now in April. And also dealing with the reality of these, I guess, vaccine side effects. When I look back now, I see it, but I think at the time I thought it was just some kind of fatigue or like exhaustion from the year. But I think I'm sure you'll understand the role of the spike protein affecting endothelial lining or the blood vessels in the body. And I think there's something to do with that. But in terms of the mRNA technology, I was going to ask a question about the medical ethics and how do you guys approach that? Because I've spoken to a few people who've struggled with vaccine injuries on the channel, and there's always that thought of, okay, they upfront they tell you there's some potential side effects, adverse events, injuries. They don't specifically say you're going to die, and we know there's some deaths occurring as well. But what does that look like in the medical field? What is I guess a acceptable ethic in terms of vaccinations and the death to amount ratio, if that makes sense? Like, say 1 person in a million dies, is that acceptable? Yeah.
Right, I see what you mean. In my opinion, no death is acceptable from a pharmaceutical product. They do not have to make them dangerous. They do not have to make them contribute to so much harm and injury. And we know now in the vaccine adverse events reporting system, I mean, there's over a million adverse events. Many of them are serious. Many of them are unfortunately fatal. And so many people have been harmed, and it's quite frankly, it's just too much. It's just too much. What we actually have to do is we have to acknowledge each and every person that has been harmed, injured, or permanently disabled, or their family member died. That have to be acknowledged, and we have to begin the process of risk stratification and treatments for these individuals that have been neglected by our government now for 4 years.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I really struggle with feeling like that. When at the time I thought the vaccine was the right thing to do. I believed the narrative of safe and effective. I will protect my grandpa and my elderly from reducing my transmission potential. I will reduce the severity of my infection. All of which now I'm questioning if it was worth it at all. I took 2 Pfizer injections. It was September and I think October of 2021. And then 4 months later, got my COVID infection, absolutely knocked me. And what would you say, I guess, to someone with a vaccine injury? How do they move forward in life and, without maybe getting support from these pharmaceuticals that have made this product and then aren't offering them support? Yeah.
Well, so there are places you'll have to locate. I would call them vaccine injured friendly doctors. Doctors that have been treating these injuries now for the past few years, and there are many of them now at this point. I know Dr. McCullough is one of them. Dr. Pierre Corey, and I know there's so many others that have been treating people that have been injured, because unfortunately a vast majority of physicians have no clue. They want nothing to do with treating a vaccine injured patients. And that's probably because of the fact that they have pushed it. They have pushed it for so many years, and they'll feel absolutely terrible inside, guilty that they have injured their own patients and they have contributed to all this excess mortality. And so for people that have been injured, I know there is Dr. McCullough, and also at the McCullough Foundation, we have developed a protocol. Unfortunately, it needs to be studied, with rigorous long-term placebo-controlled trials. Unfortunately, there's no funding from the government given to us or any of these other groups who have these protocols to do these large trials. So this is all we've got at the moment. But what it is, it's nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. And so these are all natural compounds, nothing synthetic there. And what they're supposed to do is help the body clear out the spike protein, help degrade this protein, because now it's been found in the body 6 months after 6 months after vaccination. So it's staying in the body. It's now been associated with all sorts of diseases. I mean, there's over 300 peer-reviewed papers now. We have this actually spike protein research library. It's on our Courageous Discourse Substack. Over 300 studies show just the spike protein alone is highly pathogenic. And so it's not so this highly pathogenic protein is just in every vital organ system, because the vaccine now has been shown to spread, biodistribute throughout the entire body. It doesn't just stay in the arm like they claimed. So they completely lied to us about that. And now people are left with these toxic proteins in various organ systems. And so it's pertinent that these proteins are cleared out.
I 100% agree with you. Many of the, I guess, what's the right word? A functional doctor that I've seen, just to help with the overall condition. I know there's blood vessel damage in my case. I've tested for microclots, but I've recently come across this McCullough protocol, which is why I was so excited to chat to you. And I was actually just grabbing the supplements that I have. I've got this is curcumin and bromelain and nattokinase. I suppose there's different brands and variations of these, but if you could explain a bit more to listeners, why these three in combination? What makes it better than, I don't know, say a spirulina or some other anti-inflammatory, Yeah.
Right. So well, first, right now, this study that presents all this is published. It's actually indexed in the National Library of Medicine. It's called A Clinical Approach to Post-Acute Sequelae After COVID-19 Vaccination or Infection. And so that's published. Everyone can go check it out. But regarding so we'll start with nattokinase. This is derived from soy, right? So this is a byproduct of when they're making natto. This bacillus bacteria gets in there, and this is a byproduct, nattokinase. Nattokinase is a potent antithrombotic. It's a potent blood thinner. And so, and then this is one of the primary issues with these vaccine injury syndromes is this clotting, right? And the spike protein induces clots that can't be broken down by the body. The body will have a very difficult time. So it's nice to introduce these agents that have been proven to be mostly safe, like very safe actually. And so this nattokinase gets in and helps dissolve these blood clots. And at the same time, in the test tube, nattokinase has been shown to directly interfere and degrade spike protein. And so that's a double whammy with nattokinase. And then you have bromelain. Again, the purpose of bromelain is similar. It's the best attempt to degrade this spike protein. It's another proteolytic enzyme, which means it digests proteins. That's what this bromelain does, and it's actually from pineapples. So if you eat pineapples, you're going to get a dose of this. And so bromelain is a supporting compound there. It's also anti-inflammatory, because we know people are highly inflamed with this protein and these syndromes. And then we have curcumin. Now, curcumin, the primary purpose of that is also an anti-inflammatory, calm the inflammation down, but also it blocks, it's been shown to occupy the ACE2 receptor, which is the same receptor that the spike protein binds to on our cells. And so if we kind of block that off from spike protein, the spike protein is going to have a more difficult time binding to our cells. And so those three are the base. They're the base. And Dr. McCullough, he's describing in our paper, it's described that other compounds that are added onto this, such as vitamin C, such as vitamin D, such as ivermectin in some cases. And so it's just a base to get rid of that spike protein, and things are added on after that as indicated.
Incredible. That's a great explanation. Thank you so much, Nic. I wanted to ask, in terms of a vaccine injury, do we know how long that that vaccine is producing spike protein for. That's something that has worried me, because I read in a little leaflet, oh, it's supposed to be, 2 to 3 weeks it produces it and then it stops. But I'm wondering, because of a spike protein antibody test I did, an IgG, I think it is, that's a long-term antibodies, my levels were very high 6 weeks apart, and this is now 2.5 years post-vaccination. And so there was that thought of, what if I do have a vaccine injury? What if my body is still making spike protein? Is that possible after 2 years?
Well, so regarding the antibody test, it's not reflective of exactly how much spike protein is in your body at that current time, because there's a delay, there's a lag with these antibody numbers. So say you sucked out all the spike protein from your body, for the next many months, your body's still going to show these antibodies against the spike protein. So that's the problem right now. We don't have any tests. No urine test, blood test that can just directly tell us how much spike protein is in the body at the current time. We don't have it. That needs to be developed. That needs to be easily accessible for people, because right now we are all relying on those antibody tests. Now, it is possible in some cases that you can still produce this protein for extended periods of time. Unfortunately, it's never been fully demonstrated, so we don't know. But we do have these antibody tests that show very, very high levels years down the line, and there's possible reasons for that. Some of the vials were contaminated with DNA plasmids, and so some of these plasmids are actually spike encoding DNA, and so there are concerns that some people could have got this DNA, the spike coding DNA they used in the manufacturing process, and it actually gotten in their own genome and reverse transcribed, and so they're producing this protein. But we don't know. Nobody's testing it. There's a few labs, but there's no funding going into this, and so this entire thing should be investigated. And so and we know the spike protein's been circulating in the blood for 6 months. We know it persists in tissues for years, and so. Again, it's just pertinent to get this out of the body.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think a lot of the functional doctors I've seen, they don't like giving things names and terming it long COVID or long vax and things. They just say it's a post spike condition, and I agree with that in some ways, because people we like to know basically what we are suffering with, because it gives us a bit of peace of mind, I think, just to know what's wrong with our bodies. For a long time, I was just trying to figure out what was wrong. But the point is basically, besides the titles and all of those names and things, one of the things that's come up in online and in media was that the fact that we were given a vaccine batch that wasn't what they were doing and using in the trials. And do you have any insights into the reasons they would do that? Is it similar to, say, I was a car manufacturer and I present a beautiful prototype and I let a few people test it, and then when I get to mass production, maybe I've made the wheels a bit cheaper, or some body panels I've modded. I know that's a different comparison from my side as a designer, but do we know a little bit about why they didn't give us the same as the trial?
My guess would be because cheaper. They wanted to cheapen the process. They wanted to cut some corners. And they wanted the trials to look safer than the actual product would be. So there could be many, many reasons there. But that's very, very disturbing that they basically just lied to everybody. They didn't give them the same product in the trials. And actually, we have to remember that all these batches are different. So many people, nobody even really got the same product. The quality control was so bad. Some people got a tiny dose of the mRNA. Some people got a massive dose, depending on the batch. And you can check your batch at howbadismybatch.com, which uses the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, and it'll tell you how many people died from this batch, how many reports of blood clots were there from my batch. So that's an important tool you can use to see what the possible risks you might face regarding your injection. And so that's an important tool. And And yeah, so batches, wow, they just vary so much, and that's another reason we see in some areas of the country that had high vaccination rates.
Mm,
They actually, some of them did just fine, right? There was not really many adverse events at all. You
mm,
know,
mm.
it's almost like they did receive a safe product. And so, yeah, that's a big issue for sure.
Mm. I think that's a tension for me. Is like I can't say that a vaccine is going to harm 100% of the people who take it, you know. But the same way, I can't say 100 it's 100% safe either. And that's something I wanted to ask about is the clotting that happens with the spike protein. I understand a bit of the process, how it misfolds fibrins and other proteins in your blood, and then it kind of causes these little amyloid fibrin microclots, which I've tested for and I have. And what is the reason some people have that versus some don't? Is there insights into that?
So some people would have that. I mean, I guess it comes down to genetics, right? So everybody's different. People will react to the same substance differently, and it just depends of how your body's built, how your body will react to certain things. You know, any autoimmune issues you might have had that were undetected. Just so many factors that can play into to the differing effects. And also going back to batches, that could be another reason. Like maybe
Mm,
say the guy that didn't get any clots, he got a dud batch. He received almost no mRNA, almost no spike. But say you got a different batch, you got a huge dose of the spike, so you have more spike circulating, more chances for clotting to occur.
mm. That's that's scary to think about. I will definitely go check out the website to look at the batch numbers. I know that's something that a lot of vaccine injured friends and community I've connected with on X try and track down is their batch number. And something I'm still wanting to do with Discovery is locate that form that I signed. Obviously, I signed my indemnity to say, you know, I can't sue you if something bad happens. But in that sense, I wanted to get back to the vaccine reports and some of those, I guess, documents you've been, I guess, submitting to the medical journals. What are the results looking like in terms of the vaccine, like I guess, adverse events or injuries ratio, and also the death rates ratio, and say in 1 million people? Yeah.
Yeah, so well, let me say this. First of all, today we just published a new study in the journal Science, Public Health Policy and the Law. You'll see it on social media. So what we did was we actually collected all of the evidence to get these shots off the market. And what's presented in that paper is absolutely undeniable. It's by far enough evidence to remove them off the market. And so we'll start with excess mortality. So the highest estimate we have right now that's in the peer-reviewed literature is 17 million dead worldwide by September 2023 from these shots. The number is probably higher than that. Now it's 2025. And so we have and then we have 11 other studies showing excess mortality, correlations with death, increased risk of death, etc. That's demonstrated now. Our autopsy paper was also published a few months ago, demonstrates a causal link between COVID vaccines and death. So the vaccines can kill, the biological plausibility is met. And we have the vaccine adverse events reporting system. There's about 38,000 deaths reported in there right now. It's underreported by about 30. That's a conservative factor. So we get over 600 or around 900,000 deaths just based on VAERS reports. And so the numbers are so high. We have DNA contamination. Basically every time they look in the vial, even the most recent study, these high school students, they looked in the vials, they found this DNA contamination way over regulatory limits because the quality control is so disastrous. They don't even clean out the DNA plasmids. They just basically leave them in there and they don't care about the repercussions. And so products are contaminated. And then lastly, they don't work. they have negative efficacy. That's now shown by 5 studies. And one of those is from the CDC. One of those is from the Cleveland Clinic. The CDC one actually looked in infants, right? They had little babies who got these shots, compared them to who didn't get them. The ones who got them were almost twice as likely to become infected with SARS-CoV-2 than the unvaccinated ones. So it increases your risk of infection. The Cleveland Clinic one showed this was dose dependent. So the more doses you got, the higher risk of infection was. And then over time, as the antibodies wear off, about 6 months. So so if we look in the beginning, the first vaccines, there was a slight protection there from the first variants, the alpha variant. Those were bad variants. But unfortunately, after 6 months, your protection from these vaccines would wear off, and then you become more likely to be infected. So it just rebounds. So it completely fails, completely backfires. It's killed so many people. It's contaminated, and if we look in the past, for the past recalls, the Qatar polio vaccine in 1955 was withdrawn after 10 deaths. The swine flu vaccine after 20 to 50 deaths, and that was in 1970s. And in 1999, the Rhodoshield vaccine, that was withdrawn for 15 cases of bowel obstruction. And so now we have these massive estimates of death with the COVID shots, and they've done absolutely nothing. So it's just a shocking comparison. And again, all of this is laid out in the study that was just published today in Science Public Health Policy and the Law. So I recommend all your viewers to go check that out. We got to get these off the market.
Yeah, I will link all your journals below, and thanks so much for that information. That's incredible to know. I think a lot of us are suffering these post COVID and post vaccine effects, and not really knowing where to turn to, what to try, what to do. But just that McCullough protocol is also very encouraging. So it's something I've just started about a week ago. And yeah, I'm hoping it'll help me in time. I think it takes about a year. Is that right? Or is there a timeline? Depends on the person.
Yeah, it's estimated, according to Dr. McCullough's observations with his patients, he says it does take about a year. It's a long process, unfortunately. There's, the spike is everywhere. It takes time to clear out, it takes time to rid out of these tissues where it's basically embedded in. And so, yeah, that is his estimate. It could take longer. But again, the main thing we need to now advance the science is to conduct these large studies, measure exactly the amount of spike in the body, both before and after these treatments. So we know exactly what is it doing. And hopefully with this new administration in the U.S., we can start to do some of this research.
Yeah, I've seen all the stuff all over social media with the US and the politicians. I won't get into that, but I'm glad that there's some kind of hope for research ongoing. I wanted to ask, I lost my train of thought now. Brain fog is one of the symptoms, unfortunately, of long COVID. There we go. In terms of patients that your foundation and Peter sees, are there long COVID cases as well? Were you seeing these clotting issues as well?
Yeah, a lot of them are these long COVID. So there's two subsets. There's long COVID from the virus. Some people never got these shots. They do have long COVID. They still have the spike everywhere. And then we have these people that got the vaccine, never were infected. Maybe they had asymptomatic infection. And then we call that this long vaccine injury syndrome, which is now actually kind of well described in the literature. There's about 5 or 6 studies that describe it. And actually the prevalence of the long vaccine syndrome is high. I mean, it ranges from, I think, 10 to 40% of vaccine recipients can get this syndrome, which is basically the equivalent of long COVID, because unfortunately they have similar mechanisms in that the virus goes in, infects everywhere, right? The spike gets everywhere. And then the vaccine does something similar, gets everywhere, but instead it instructs your own body to make the spike. So they're different in some ways. But actually, the vaccine spike protein is the full length version. The virus one, when the virus attaches to your cells, it cuts in half. The spike cuts in half in both segments S1 and S2. So you have these fragments with the virus. But yeah, with the vaccine, it's full length. So we don't know what the implications of that are. They're not studying that. But yeah, these two syndromes are now so prevalent across the world.
In terms of the spike protein that we're seeing from the vaccine and or the infection, is there a way yet to test the antibodies and to test, to verify if they're from, spike protein of the virus versus the vaccine? Like you were saying earlier, the virus has a full length DNA. Sorry, explain that term again. You said the one gets cut into half, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. The vaccine one's full length, so it has both its S1 and S2 segments. And the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein on the virus, it also has S1 and S2 segments, but when it gets in the body, it attaches to your ACE2 receptors and it gets cut in half.
Okay. And in terms of that ACE2 receptor and antibodies being produced when the spike protein enters your blood and your body recognizes that, do we have a way to test for those antibodies if they're from from vaccine or from COVID?
There are ways. Unfortunately, they're very complex. There's a study by Brogna and colleagues, it's published. They actually were able to look. There's a certain structure component of the spike, a certain amino acid chain that's only on this vaccine version that keeps it spliced together. And so you have to look at the exact what's making up this protein in the vaccine version to differentiate it between the vaccine version and the viral version. Unfortunately, it's very difficult. There's no widespread testing people can order to do this. Only certain very specialized laboratories can do this. And so, this needs to be something that becomes widely available.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would love a way just to know the facts of my case. I think everyone just wants to know what's happening in their body. And like you've outlined, there are long COVID cases without vaccination. There's vaccination injuries without COVID. I believe I'm one of the hybrid cases where I've got a bit of both. Although I think most of the damage was from the virus, but again, it's hard to prove, without those like trials of what's the word you'd use if you do like a blood test before vaccine, after vaccine, before COVID, after COVID, those kind of things. I don't have those tests to compare, basically, if that makes sense. So thank you so much again for your time, Nic. I feel like we could talk a long time about vaccines and all the data that's happening, but I'll definitely be following along. Where can people find you on platforms online to connect with you and the McCullough Foundation and see the latest research from your side?
Yes, you can follow my personal account on X. It's just at Nic Hulscher. And you can also follow the McCullough Foundation account on X. That's just at McCullough Fund. And then also our Courageous Discourse Substack. Please follow that. We're putting out about 3 posts a day. It includes me, Dr. McCullough, and John Leake, world-renowned historian and author. And so please go follow us on all those platforms. We would very much appreciate it.
Incredible. I'll definitely put those links below, and feel free to follow along, guys. Thank you so much again for your time, Nicholas. I really appreciate it, and all the best with the research going forward.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.